there was one specific story that I really wanted to start with, and that relates to actually VP Harris, Joe Biden's vice president, Kamala Harris, who, of course, if you remember, was really considered like this big up-and-coming Democrat during her presidential run. The media really tried to force her down the electorate's throat. It was just nonstop propaganda in favor of Kamala and completely ignoring her actual record of prosecutorial horror, which she wreaked in California. Of course, she was the leading attorney general in California, the top cop, as many people said. But let's take a look at how she's doing now that she is VP, now that she is in this position of prominence, which, of course, was handed to her not by the people, but by Joe Biden unilaterally, who made her vice president, despite her, lack of an ability to campaign effectively or to speak to people's actual, wants and desires as voters. But yeah, so, Biden picked her as VP. A lot of people said that, that he didn't really want to pick her as VP. And a lot of other people said that Jill Biden in specific really didn't want to pick her as VP, specifically after Kamala went after Joe Biden on the first debate stage, which actually was her only real effective moment in the entire campaign, ironically, attacking the man who she became the vice president of. So I think it's fair to say that Jill and Joe Biden's reservations about picking Harris have come to, fruition in a big way and a pretty bad way if you're the Democratic establishment right now. So according to this new report, Kamala Harris has become the most unpopular U.S. vice president 6 months into an administration since at least the 1970s. And it's talking about how she could possibly bounce back and all that. I think we all know that's not really going to happen. But yeah, two polls show her at 46% of Americans approving and 47% or 48% disapproving. So now she's officially underwater. She's officially more unpopular than she is popular, which is not a great sign. I think a few other people even pointed out that, she was less popular now than like Dick Cheney, which is pretty insane. An Economist YouGov poll found that 41% of voters aged 18 to 29 had an unfavorable view of Mrs. Harris, with only 36% viewing her favorably. So again, that's more people that have an unfavorable view of the vice president than a favorable view. And, this might not be such a big deal. Who really cares? The vice president's always kind of, by definition, taking a back seat. It's kind of a symbolic role, to be honest. But the reason why I think this actually matters is because, 2024 is coming up, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Democratic Party tries to run, Joe Biden in his archaic state at this point, or if they're going to try to run Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. I think it'll all come down to Joe Biden's cognitive and physical health, and if they really think he's up to the task. I think they're going to try, if at all costs, to make sure that he's the top of the ticket now that they know these numbers, because let's be honest, it would be a fucking disaster if they get Harris up there, top of the ticket, and then, someone like Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis takes the GOP nomination. It would make it a lot easier for them to take down, again, this historically unpopular vice presidential candidate who would be at the top of the ticket. That's bad news for the Democrats.
Well, yeah, of course it's bad news for the Democrats, and I'll pass this off to you, RJ, really quickly. But the one thing that I just want to add in here immediately is like, what the fuck did they expect, right? Kind of what you were saying, Gavin. I mean, she never, ever had a legitimate following. It was all media hype, right? And they did this constantly. It would have been it would have been the same result if he picked like John Hickenlooper to be his vice president, right? I mean, they went with her for reasons that basically spelled out identity politics. Like Joe Biden's temperament put him more in favor with like batshit crazy Amy Klobuchar kind of a character. That was who he was most likely going to align with until George Floyd happened, and so they thought, oh, we'll appease the progressives by having a black woman be the nominee, but we'll make her a cop so that we, know that she won't actually do anything. So I think that all of that is just kind of coming back to haunt them. I mean, she has no pizzazz, no appeal as a politician, as an individual. Like this has nothing to do with her being the first female vice president or the first black woman vice president or anything like that, of course, which is going to be the defense that a lot of people give, or why her numbers are so low, which is unfortunate, right? Because she really does deserve a really low approval rating. And I think it's just surprising to see it this early on in the administration. Typically, when a president comes into a power for at least the first 12 months, there's a sort of a honeymoon period with the electorate. The numbers are a lot higher. We haven't seen seen this with Joe Biden. His support has basically immediately crumbled because they've seen the people have experienced the fact that he's not willing to do anything. There have been no sweeping reforms that any of us were promised. Nobody even got their $2,000. But on top of that, the eviction moratorium is up, and people like AOC were saying that in an interview recently that, Joe Biden had indicated to all of Congress that he was going to use executive order to extend the moratorium on evictions. That who knows if that's true or not. They had no plan in Congress. They should have anyway. But the fact of the matter is that it's all been empty. So you take Joe Biden, who was elected purely on nostalgia, and then this Kamala Harris figure who was basically just a media spectacle. When the disappointment comes, of course, all of her support is evaporating.
Yeah, I have to agree with you guys 100% on that. And when it comes to Kamala, like Gavin said initially, in my eyes and many other people's eyes, that Kamala is basically picked as VP because of Wall Street, because of Silicon Valley, and because of military-industrial complex. We've seen the Tulsi Gabbard video 100 times. Many of us watch it because it's so entertaining, and it's inject this into my veins, regardless of how you feel about Tulsi now. But that video really describes that. And so, look at Kamala's base before she dropped out. When she was very popular, she was basically the TikTok star among young people until people saw how terrible Kamala actually was, and they're like, "Ew, we don't want that." And then with 94 crime bill, that's all Joe Biden. But then by Kamala herself being the cop in chief, she likes to say she's a top cop. That pissed off a lot of the older electorate. So Kamala herself it's just all doing on her own. And what's also surprising too is I have a lot of family who are Black boomers, who are older Black Americans, and I had family over this weekend. Guess how many times Kamala was mentioned when we talked about politics? 0 times. So she is basically, no one actually cares about her. Essentially, she was picked just so they could say, hey, if we have Uncle Joe in office, at least we have someone who's Black in a high place we could look at. That's pretty much all it is. And so Kamala's doing this to herself. Look at her stances on immigration. Yes, the right called her out on it, but herself being a terrible politician, we've all covered on Frampton Leftists about her own staff, how they feel about her, how she's a terrible vice president. She treats her staff terribly. She's on par with Amy Klobuchar. All she has to do is throw a stapler and they're at the same level. So it's just ridiculous with Kamala. I don't see her being this champion. She's just like Hillary.
Yeah.
The more she talks, the more she fucks up.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and by the way, her approval rating is tanking, so is Joe Biden. Joe Biden at one point, I believe it was 3 weeks ago, had a 52% approval rating. That is ridiculous. He's supposed to be Uncle Joe wearing aviator sunglasses, licking ice cream, and now he's tanking in the polls too. And now you have Auntie Kamala. Every time she has a walking video on Twitter, she gets roasted in the shade room. These are Black entertainment sites. They're like, where's my money, Joe? Kamala, all you do is fucking walk. Do something. It's tanking among Black support.
I think what you actually pointed out is very accurate, RJ, that, Kamala is kind of like Hillary in a certain sense, where in that everything she does, she just makes herself more unpopular. And I think going back to a point that Zach said about how, this low approval rating isn't because she's a Black woman, which a lot of people are going to try to deflect and just say, America's too racist to handle Kamala Harris or whatever. No, and obviously America is super fucking racist. But the point is that Kamala Harris is a terrible politician who stands for nothing, and she's also just not a good politician. If you think about someone like Michelle Obama, she's actually really popular among the Democratic electorate, even though she also stands for very little to nothing as a politician. She's at least a good politician rhetorically. She has the chops, just like her husband. She's a good speaker. She's inspiring to all that stuff. She can kind of nail that optimistic tone and, grand gestures and all that stuff in a way that someone like Kamala can. So Kamala really has the worst of both worlds. Not only is she vapid, neoliberal, and stands for absolutely nothing, has no semblance of a populist message, but she's also just an ineffective communicator that comes off as extremely insincere. She drips coastal elitism. People can see right through her when she tries to do her dumb little laugh, to get out of a tough question. People are sick of this politician because, again, she can't effectively communicate with voters. She can't effectively communicate a message that galvanizes anyone on the Democratic Party. And again, the only appeal that she seemingly has is people that just want, to embrace the identity politics at all costs without actually, giving a shit about the politics itself.
I mean, that's the exact formula that she operates in. She is the perfect embodiment of those politics. And I think it's, fortunately, it's a dwindling supply of the American people that are looking to that one because they can see that she's unpopular, right? So this is something that we've been talking about a bit more. Nobody wants to support people that aren't popular, right? So if you see a politician, tanking, like that's a bad sign because usually they're not going to correct that course unless a miracle happens in campaign season where they're able to give like a speech or something. But in just the regular outlook, right, and this is basically before the shit hits the fan, her and, as you said, RJ, Joe are both polling really, really terribly. So I don't know. I guess this one thing that this is making me really think about is what will the Democratic Party do? Gavin, you'd said they're going to do anything that they can. If Joe is lucid at all, they'll, go full weekend at Biden's again and inject him with whatever they have to parade him around for those months and whatever, just so that they can kind of, tip the scale even more and try and choose his predecessor. I mean, they really thought that after Obama, they were going to be able to choose Hillary Clinton as his predecessor, that they would be able to coordinate it and move forward after all of that. And they just haven't had the, success that I think that they were all anticipating. And I don't know if they were going to be willing to just go and set up for like a suicide mission, essentially.
Well, what I'm wanting to know from both of you guys is if you think in the event that the Democratic Party does try to just run Kamala Harris, if Joe Biden is not all there, he just simply can't handle the run because his cognitive decline is too obvious. Will anyone on the progressive left, quote unquote, will anyone actually try to mount a challenge against Harris if she is the top of the ticket? Because that's what I hope happens. If they try to run Kamala Harris as the top of the ticket in 2024, I'm hoping that actually creates a lane for someone that's actually a leftist, much like in 2016, how the Democratic Party, simply trying to coronate Hillary Clinton, created a lane for Bernie Sanders, who, of course, came out of nowhere, ignited this populist movement across the country, and came damn close to winning not once but twice. So, I think if we learn the right lessons, then hopefully something like that could maybe happen again, and it could really invigorate the movement.